That is a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. The fall 2023 anime season has come to a close. This season had a fantastic mixture of anime to choose from. We had 2 harems where the protagonists didn't have girl phobia. Yor actually did assassination stuff. Lots and lots of goblins were killed. An elf learned how to feel while making us feel. I had a strong desire to adopt and protect the Yuzuki-sons. We had probably one of the most edgiest of Edge Boy series in a long time. Mia Tearmoon said Desawa more times than I can even count. I found out what a Junji Ito comedy would look like. More cute anime girls were exposed to PTSD. Naoki Urasawa reminded me over 100 times that war is bad. A dumb piggy isekai managed to raise the bar for unsettling worlds. An esports anime nearly managed to dethrone Orimo as the most siscon of siscon shows. Kamiarabi ended confusing. Thank you, Yokotaro. Shield Hero managed to outdo itself with the worst pull plotline on the last episode. Yayoi cussed out a spirit. Both 16-bit Sensation and Helk fought over who could crush its beginning hype more. And finally, Sid became Atomic for the 50th time, because that joke is still not dead. But, what ended up being the best of the best? The cream of the crop? Well, the verdict is in. This is my top 10 anime of the fall 2023 anime season. It is important to note that my top seasonal picks are based on what shows actually ended in a season. So ongoing series like Frieren and Apothecary Diaries will not be included. If they did, just know they would be number 1 and 2. Also, make sure before you leave, hit that like button down below and leave me a comment. Let me know what your picks are for this season. So with all that said, let's jump into it. Kicking things off, we have my number 10, which is Dr. Stone New World Part 2. Now, I have made it very perfectly clear to people that for some reason, Dr. Stone's one of those shows that whenever I think of a top list or whenever I think of my favorite anime of all time, Dr. Stone never comes to mind. It's not that it's a bad show. It's the opposite. It's a show that I just really find entertaining, but at the same time, I'm not in love with it or invested in it. It's just one of those series that just kind of works. I've never really kind of figured out why, because technically it's one of those series that I should hate because it's all about overly explaining things that they're creating over and over and over again. And yes, in a lot of cases, me going, I don't think you could necessarily build that. For those unaware, it's a series about the entire world being turned to stone. Every single individual being turned to stone. Jump forward many, many years later, Senku is released from that stone tomb. And he's slowly figuring out how to release other people and rebuild technology so that one day he can go to the moon. And going into part 2 of this season, we're slowly, possibly uncovering who is responsible for turning everybody to stone. And Senku is dedicated to getting after them. Now, I will admit there's a main reason why this is my number 10. That's because I didn't find this particular segment, New World, to be that interesting. But it still, at its heart, has that same thing that I'm addicted to. This idea of building from scratch and that excitement that comes from discovery and science and all that kind of stuff. Essentially, you have a lot of people that were never turned to stone. They were actually people that were birthed after the stoning happened. And those people are now discovering this science that Senku has all kind of tapped in his brain. It's a lot of hype. It still gets me super hyped every single episode, and I just thoroughly enjoy it, despite the fact that it's, again, not my favorite series of all time. Going into my number 9, Buta Reba, the story of a man who turned into a pig. This is a series that I wasn't too sure about. Coming into it, I thought I wasn't going to enjoy it because mainly the seiyuu behind the pig, which is the voice of the guy that did Kirito. I am kind of tired of his voice. But he absolutely sells and nails this series. It's essentially about a guy that is reincarnated into the body of a pig, and he's in some kind of alternate world where there's magic and all this kind of stuff. And he's quickly rescued by a girl named Jess. Now, Jess is one of this race that is subjugated. They're a group of people, a race that is pretty much treated as maids and servants in this world. But the special thing about this race is that they have the ability to read minds. So, being that he's a pig and he can't talk, she's able to hear what he's thinking. And the two of them hit it off really quickly, and over time, Jess has to make this journey to the kingdom's capital. And so this pig decides to go with her on this journey. But it's a very dangerous journey, as this race that Jess is are constantly hunted down. They'll be used, discarded, and in a lot of cases their heads will be chopped off so they can get the color from them that yields power. Where this series excels early on is the chemistry between the pig and Jess. It's very kind of comical and funny in the idea that the pig is constantly thinking about pervy things, and Jess always hears it. Now, Jess is very understanding of it and very welcoming to it because she's always lived her entire life being a servant. So if he is thinking about something that he wants to do to her, she just kind of accepts it and says, okay, we could do that. And he goes, wait, no, I didn't actually mean that. Now, the reason why this series is down at 9 and not much higher is because the second half of the show is where things get a little bit rocky. Now, it is very intriguing and very interesting because it starts to get into who this race is, why they're being subjugated, why they're treated so terribly, And yes, the very darker side of this world itself, getting into how their race is hunted down, what they do to them, and yes, the question mark as if Jess can actually make it to the capital or even enter the capital to begin with. It gets very heavy and it loses a lot of that flavor and that enjoyment that I had from the earlier segment. So my warning to a lot of people is expect that even though it's a lot of fun at the very beginning, it gets really heavy and very dark at the later parts. And I really wasn't sure for quite a while if that heaviness had any value to it. But even still, in the end, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and all the reveals they had in the later part were very interesting. Moving on to my number 8, I have Tearmoon Empire. This show was so much fun. It essentially opens up with Mia Tearmoon, and she's a princess of this kingdom. And right off the bat, at the very beginning, she's actually being beheaded by her entire kingdom. They have rose up and beheaded her because she's so selfish, and there's so much terrible things befalling the kingdom, they decide to overthrow her. But when the guillotine comes down upon her, she wakes up as her 12-year-old self. Now, unlike most villainous type of shows where you have like an isekai where some Japanese kid ends up in the body of the villainess, this is Mia Tearmoon herself. This is the princess. She failed miserably, she was executed, and now she has another chance at life. Now, you would expect, okay, now she's just gonna be nice to everybody. That's not Mia Tearmoon. That's what makes this series so refreshing, is the idea that this is this snobby little princess that is very selfish, and her whole desire is just to not die. So she has this little journal that she had in her previous life that pretty much lays out how she's going to die, and she can fix that. But the entire time, you see that selfish side of her inside that's always just thinking, I just need to get away from this person because they're involved with my death, or I need to make sure I fix this situation because that's going to lead to my death. But even still, there is a lot of signs that she is changing. She's seeing that this new life, this new thing that she's doing, she does like it. Like, she does end up meeting this one prince, and she kind of starts liking being around that prince. She realized very quickly that one of her maids was the only one that ever came to see her when she was in prison, and so she just like dotes on that girl, like grab her, keep her at my side at all times. She is special. Despite the fact that she's so selfish and that turns into a lot of the humor, she does enjoy a lot of the things that she's now gaining. But I think where a lot of the humor comes with the series is the misunderstandings. She'll end up doing something selfishly in most of the cases, and somebody will see the wrong thing out of it. They'll just see that she's a genius, even though on her side, she's just kind of going on her whims. She's just trying to figure things out as she goes along. She's kind of being seen as like this genius princess, despite the fact that she never thinks of any of this stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. Her demeanor is great. I just love Mia Tearmoon's personality. It is just so much fun. Moving on to my number 7. My gosh, Migi and Dali. This is a series that I honestly struggled with wanting to put higher in my list. It is absolutely a special show. Now, for those that don't know, Migi and Dali was created by the same mangaka that did Haven't You Heard I'm Sakamoto? Nami Sano, rest in peace. Now, what this mangaka excels at is weird things done in incredibly awesome ways. That was the whole shtick with Haven't You Heard I'm Sakamoto? Somebody would pull a chair out from underneath him, and he would somehow manage to sit in the air and look cool doing it. And that's sort of what you get with Migi and Dali. You have these twins that are hiding themselves as one single person in order to be adopted into this one village to look for the killer of their mother. And you'll have this dynamic where one of them is always in the light, while the other one is hiding in the shadows. And every now and then they'll trade places. One of them will do recon while the other one is dealing with the family. And the best part about this is that the two of them are so bizarre. And yes, technically a lot of the people around them are bizarre. It seems like everybody in this town has at least one screw loose somewhere up in their head. And that turns into some of the cringiest, creepiest, bizarre, and just absolutely entertaining stuff that I've ever seen in any anime. It feels like most of the time things are done so over the top and on purpose, and every time it feels like this writer just absolutely nails it. The one example I give everybody is a situation where one of them is eating at the dinner table in front of the parents, and they become full. Well, the other one is underneath the table, and they have to trade places. And the way they swap places was just absolutely bizarre. Every night, whenever they're doing a meeting to find out what they need to do next and plan out their next day, they're always kind of inside this little tent, just so close to each other. It's so creepy. All the while, they have this fantastic musical track that's playing in the background with vocals that just completely accents the whole situation. The style of it's fantastic. The comedy is fantastic. Through and through, this show is phenomenal. The best way to describe it is a Junji Ito comedy. Yes, you heard right. A Junji Ito comedy. That's literally Migi and Dali. And yes, it gets dark as sometimes Junji Ito gets. But even when it's at its darkest, it still has this background of this is technically kind of comical and creepy. I love it. I love every single minute of it. It's a full adaptation, and I, at this point, miss it. Moving on to my number 6, I have Pluto. This series was absolutely fantastic. Great animation, great presentation by the creator of Monster that did basically his take on the Astro Boy kind of universe. It follows a guy named Gishet who is currently trying to investigate the killing of these robots that were once a part of this war. All the while during this investigation, trying to find out who's behind it, and at the same time seeing all these different robots and their involvement with the war itself, the scars of the battlefield itself, and yes, bringing up the massive question mark as to if AI, if robots themselves can feel. Can they have scars from the battle itself? And yes, that kind of relationship that humans have with robots. It's a really incredible series, but I will admit that there was a side of me that felt like a good chunk of this series wasn't that interesting. Now, yes, it is 8 episodes, 1 hour each. It is pretty much the same length of a 2-core anime series that you typically get, but when it gets out of that first half rut, the series kind of ramps up and gets incredibly good. Like every single episode, it was getting better and better and better. I really loved its take on robots and their ability to feel, and yes, getting into the aspects of war and the effects on the people themselves. It has a great style, great animation, great music, and all that kind of stuff all meshed into one incredible series. Moving on to my number 5, I have Overtake, easily the biggest surprise of the season itself. It opens up with a photographer named Koya who is having a difficulty in taking pictures of people. Now at first it seemed like a cheesy thing like, oh my gosh, he has shutter shyness, he can't take a photo of people. Why is that? You get these hints over time that he was criticized online and on media because he took a photograph of somebody during a natural disaster. Well, he's given a job to take photos of F4 racers. And during this time, he eventually meets a racer named Haruka. And Haruka is a part of like this private group that doesn't really have much money, that's trying to compete with a lot of these big corporations that have tons of money to spend on their racers and their race cars. And through watching Haruka during his struggles and being a racer, he kind of gets this invigoration in his desire to take photos again. And finally takes his first photo of a person in a long time. And he pushes to actually support the group, trying to find sponsors for them and everything. And over time, you learn more about this racer, Haruka, the competing teams themselves, and yes, getting more into Koya and why he struggles so much with taking photographs. It's one of those series where you kind of assume that it's going to go into the usual sports tropes and tropes about trauma that you typically get in anime, but honestly, in the end, over time, this was probably some of the best character writing I have seen in anime in a long time. I really did feel for Koya, and how they presented what he was going through was absolutely incredible. Additionally, I loved pretty much every single character of this series, including, and in a lot of cases more so, the rival group of Haruka. This big corporation that has 2 racers, it gets into the idea of the leader of the pack and the follower of the pack, all that kind of stuff, the difficulties that come with being at the front line, and he has a lot of insights into the industry of F4 racings in Japan and all that kind of stuff. It's really good stuff, and like I said, the character writing was absolutely phenomenal. I highly recommend checking out the series. The CGI was really well done, and yes, the music was fantastic. Moving on to my number 4, I have Arknights Paris and Frost. Yes, Arknights is back, and better than ever. I absolutely love the anime adaptation of Arknights. Now granted, I've tried the game itself, but the anime is where it's at for me. And that's mainly because, unlike some mobile games, Arknights actually has some extremely talented story writers behind it. This story is so freaking good. It essentially takes place in a world where there's this ore called Orignium, and with it came this disease, this illness that is inflicting people called oropathy. It is a disease that over time will crystallize your body. And in response to this new illness, society has pretty much turned anybody that's infected into second-class citizens and all but pretty much force them out of their cities. And yes, what comes from that is these people that have this illness eventually not wanting to take that anymore and uprising. You have the creation of a group called the Reunion that is now fighting back. And in the middle of it is our characters that we kind of follow, which is Rhodes Island. Rhodes Island is a group that's trying to find a cure for the oropathy, while at the same time trying to work with both sides in order to find peace. And yes, it's not an easy task. In the first season, we had Rhodes Island retrieve Doctor, who is this guy that was looking for a cure for the oropathy. And then the second season, we're getting more deeper into another location called Lungmen. And yes, Lungmen has its own way that it's handling the infected, but additionally, you have Reunion is coming in to take it over. And we get several perspectives, one mainly being an Amiya, who is the leader of Rhodes Island, trying to create peace between the two sides. And then on the other side, you have Shen, who is pretty much the leader of the Lungmen Defense Force. We get a deep look into the darker sides of Lungmen itself, while at the same time getting a lot of driving force for the Reunion themselves. That was one of the main reasons why I enjoyed Paris and Frost so much. Now granted, it was present before, but especially in Paris and Frost, we're getting that sense that, Yes, both sides have their reason for fighting the way they do. The reunion aren't just a bunch of bad guys for the sake of being bad. You're seeing their struggles, their pain, everything they're going through, and what society themselves has pretty much created by pushing them out. It's a series that unfortunately isn't like the most craziest animation, even though it does have some great animation points. A lot of my love for the series is the storytelling itself and, yes, incredible directing that's being done for it. The series just looks too good, and I love a lot of the characters in it. Moving on to my number 3, I have Dark Gathering. Yes, this series is so phenomenal, and my gosh, it's over, and I want another season so bad. I will admit that the last episode has like a massive amount of hype going into the next arc, and it's like, but we're not getting an announcement yet. I want an announcement. From what I understand, they're still working on the next arc. Like, it's still not even done. I would have looked like maybe an announcement for a core, maybe at least, but we'll have to wait and see. But Dark Gathering itself, the first season, this season itself, I absolutely loved it. Now, I will say there is only one stain you can pull out of me, and that is it's not the most incredibly animated series ever. This show loves to utilize a lot of action stills and panning stills that don't really have fluidity to them. But that's like the only thing you can pull out of me. The music, the sound, the characters, the voicing, the writing, everything about this series just screams, pun not intended, screams absolutely fantastic horror, thriller, suspense. It's very rare that we get a horror series like Dark Gathering. I kind of equate it to something like Miracle-chan without the ecchi and the cutesy and the slice of life stuff that had. It is just pure dark horror. And yes, it is extremely dark. It opens up with a guy named Keitaro who at some point in his past was cursed by a spirit. And that kind of drove him to being kind of a shut-in because it led to the harming of a friend of his. Well, over time, he kind of gets over that, goes to college, and eventually becomes a tutor of students. And one such student that he becomes a tutor of is Yayoi. Now, Yayoi is very special. This is a little girl that just has a very dark secret. She basically has two pupils. One allows her to see the world of the living, and one allows her to see the world of the dead. And Yayoi is taking huge advantage of this because in her past, she got in a car accident with her parents. Her father died, and her mother was taken away by a spirit. And she confirmed that she was taken away because every time she goes to her family grave, she only sees a spirit of her father. And Yayoi knows that she can't take on this big, massive spirit. She knows that it's powerful, so she has to create an army of spirits to fight it. And the way that she goes about that is absolutely incredible. She puts spirits inside of dolls, and then makes a pact with them by putting fingernail clippings or hair strands into the doll itself. So whenever she is harmed, they'll be harmed. And additionally, another way that she kind of makes them submit is that she'll put the spirit inside of her room with all the other spirits that were harmed because they attacked her, which attacked them. And it kind of turns into this really crazy, twisted submission that she makes these spirits go through, and eventually allows them to absorb each other and get stronger to the point where they become graduates. And graduates are extremely powerful and extremely dangerous to use, but she has to use them in order to defeat what she wants to defeat. I absolutely loved every single minute of it. A lot of the stories were massively screwed up and extremely twisted. I mean, we're getting into, yes, like this one situation where a father accidentally killed the mother, and the daughter somehow makes a pact with some sort of spirit in order to create an angel, and she has to birth a child with the father and then sacrifice it. It gets super twisted and super dark. Oh yeah, the child for the meatballs. The child that was fed meatballs from the mother, which weren't normal meat. It's super twisted, and I loved every single minute of it. I highly recommend checking out Dark Gathering, and like I said before, I cannot wait for another season. Hopefully they get the next arc wrapped up really nicely and they can do another season, so we'll see. Moving on to number 2, I have 100 Girlfriends Who Really Love You. This show was an absolute blast for me, and so refreshing. Far too often do we get these dumb harem shows where it's all about the girls. Like, the main character is just, they're meant to be like these self-insert characters that have no personality, or they're constantly screaming because they see a girl in front of them. Like, they have girl phobia and they just can't be anywhere near them. Like, oh, no, don't touch me. Rentaro is so different. He is such a refreshing main character that is put in the situation where essentially he's always been rejected his entire life. And finally he goes to this god, and the god tells him, yeah, I kind of screwed up. It just takes a while before it starts to kick in. And I accidentally wrote down that you have 100 soulmates. And so you have to return their love, otherwise bad things will befall them. And yes, sure enough, he's constantly running into these girls where he gets his zappy sensation with them, they get a zappy sensation with him, and they realize they're soulmates, and he pretty much returns their love. They both kind of fall in love with each other, and yes, that harem is constantly growing and getting larger and larger. And they all know this. He pretty much introduces each one of them to the group and says, okay, this is my next girlfriend, whatever. And it is just so much fun. I think the thing that I love most about this show is, like I said before, I respect Rintaro as a character, and he's one of the few cases where I can honestly say, this dude deserves it. This guy goes above and beyond for every single one of these girls. He does these great things for them, and it feels like the love is more natural than you typically get. But yes, obviously, a lot of the enjoyment of this series is each and every single one of these girls adds something unique to the flavor and the chemistry of the series, and how the writer kind of juggles all that is absolutely incredible. Hakari, who is super, super thirsty. You have Kanane, who is the massive tsundere. You have Shizuka, who is the quiet girl that has trouble speaking out, so she talks through her phone with text-to-speech. Nano, who is like overly calculative. Everything has to be efficient and all that kind of stuff. Kusuri, who's just making chaos in the group because she makes these crazy potions. So on and so forth. I love every single one of these girls, and they're so much fun. And like I said, the comedy writing is just absolutely phenomenal. There was never a moment throughout the series where I was like, gosh, that was like a boring episode. No, every episode I'm just laughing out loud. The references, the chemistry, the over the top, the ecchi here and there. It's just so good, and I loved every single minute of it. And yes, can't wait for the second season. Which all comes down to my #1 anime of the fall 2023 anime season, a series that nobody, absolutely nobody should watch. Yes, a girl and her guard dog. Anyways, no, the #1 anime of the fall 2023 anime season is the Yuzuki Family's 4 Sons. This show is an absolute gem. It is a show that I wish more people would watch, but unfortunately, very few people will watch because it is, yes, a drama, comedy, slice of life. It's always that last part that just scares everybody away. But Yuzuki Family 4 Son is super, super wholesome and super massively relatable. Like the title leads you to believe, it follows the 4 sons of the Yuzuki family. Shortly after the youngest son, Gakuto, was born, the parents unfortunately passed away. And while all the family members were trying to figure out who would take in each one of these sons into their families, like aunts and uncles and whatnot, the eldest, Hayato, decides that he doesn't want them parted. So he decides that he's going to take care of all of them. Even when he's still in college, he decides to get a job, and he's doing all this work in order to keep them all together. And through the episodes, you're seeing different perspectives of each one of the brothers. What they feel about the loss of their parents, what they think of their other brothers, what they're currently dealing with. And yes, the struggles sometimes they have with even getting along with each other. A lot of Hayato, the eldest brother's perspective, is yes, that he is having to take on this responsibility of taking care of his brothers, all the while trying to keep up a job in order to have money to keep them, taken care of. It's a lot of burden, a lot of weight that's put on his shoulders that, yes, at times, he struggles with even accepting. You have the second and the third son, Mikoto and Minato, who, yes, when they were younger, didn't get along very well. And you see what they kind of struggled with early on, and eventually getting that bond that it eventually came from it. And then you have Gakuto, the youngest, who unfortunately didn't really know much about his parents at all. And yes, the struggles that he has with being a burden upon like Hayato and wanting to do things to help alleviate that struggle. What I love so much about the show is that it feels so real. Having 2 brothers of my own, I relate to a lot of what they go through. And I think the writer did an incredible job of portraying each one of their stories and the emotion they go through. I kind of point out all the time the story of Mikoto and his struggles with getting along with Minato. It's portrayed in a way that almost shows his inner thoughts through this sketchiness that sort of shows that boiling point that he's going through. It has an incredible art style to it. I love the designs themselves, and I love the characters overall. Like I joked about at the very beginning, but it's totally true. I just want these 4 brothers to be happy. I want to see them smile, and I want them to just succeed in life. They're definitely kids that you just want to root on from the sidelines. It felt like every single episode, at some point in the episode, I got emotional or cried. It's just that good. The writing is that good. And it never feels fake. It feels real. Like I said, it's situations that I personally have faced. These characters feel like they were wrote in a way that feels alive, and not wrote in a way that feels like an anime. It doesn't feel like it's wrote in a way that is bombastic. There's no melodrama here. These characters feel real. Their struggles feel real. and their resolve feels real. I highly, highly, highly suggest checking out the Uzuki Family's Four Sons. It is absolutely incredible, and yes, it is my #1 favorite anime of the fall 2023 anime season. And that's it. For my honorable mentions, I'll mention Goblin Slayer 2nd season. Still really enjoying that series. Really having a blast watching it. Helk, unfortunately, while I did love like a large chunk of the show, the other half just kind of fell off a cliff, unfortunately. I wanted to love it so much, but it just kind of didn't work in the end. Stardust Telepath was absolutely just a pure joy to watch, even though it made me cry way too much. But I did feel like it got a little bit too melodrama-y towards the second half, but it was still fantastic. It essentially gave me my Hattori Bochi vibes for the season, that sense of wanting to cheer on this poor girl that just can't speak out. Saint's Magic Powers Omnipotent 2nd season was still absolutely fantastic. I will admit there was like an entire arc that I just didn't really care for, which was unfortunate. Vexations of a Vampire Shut-In was just too much fun, and I really enjoyed that. Disgraced Noble Lady was a lot of fun as well. I actually really enjoyed the chemistry of that show. I think the main guy in that series was just, I loved his personality. His inner dialogue and stuff was just way too good. Spy Family 2nd season finally gave me Yor being awesome, and I really enjoyed that. And like I mentioned earlier, yes, Apothecary Diaries, Farron Beyond Journey's End, and Undead Unluck were just absolutely fantastic. It's just unfortunately, like I said, those shows are going on into winter, so they'll probably be my top picks for winter, so we'll wait and see. But that's it. That's all of my picks for the fall 2023 anime season. I hope you guys enjoyed this video as always. Hopefully you found something in here to check out. Like, you know, the Uzuki Family, give that show 3 episodes. Give it 3 episodes, and then if you don't like it, you can drop it. But check out that show. It is so freaking good. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video as always. If you did, make sure that like button down below. Comment. Let me know what your top picks are for the fall anime season. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button's on my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Here also soon, I'll be doing a top 10 of the entire year of 2023. Additionally, if you like this content and you want to support this channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate what it does. And y'all take care.